Hello cider makers, welcome back. And in today's video, we're going to be making a British-style bittersweet cider. Making a bittersweet cider in the United States used to be very difficult as it would require you to have access to special apples or access to bittersweet concentrate, both of which are very uncommon in the United States. Fortunately, homebrewer suppliers like More Beer have provided a resource for cider makers in the United States to get that quintessential bittersweet flavor via this bittersweet cider concentrate that's for sale. The recipe is very simple, but it has a few ingredients that can be considered to be rather expensive compared to other homebrewing ingredients. The recipe is as follows. We start out with 1.5 gallons of Treetop 3-apple blend, 1.5 gallons of Treetop sweet and tart, and 2.4 gallons of bittersweet concentrate mix. For the bittersweet concentrate mix, we use 0.4 gallons of bittersweet concentrate and 2 gallons of water mixed together. My water choice was spring water, but you can use whatever water you'd like to use. In addition to the liquid ingredients, 10 grams of fermentation was added to primary, as well as a whopping 25 grams of malic acid was added to primary. This was done to get a starting pH of around 3.8. This cider will be going through a malo-lactic fermentation, so a lot of that sharpness that would be given by the malic acid is going to be changed into a more rounded acid, lactic acid. The yeast choice for today is going to be WLP 775, which is an English cider yeast. This cider was fermented on a single French oak wine stick, medium plus toast, and was left to ferment for about 4 months prior to changing over to secondary to allow it to clear. If you've watched my Agar Clarification video, you will know that this is the cider that I used in that video. This cider is exceptionally difficult to clear. Out of the 4 times that I've made it so far, the only method to reliably clear this cider has been Agar Clarification. Link to that video will be in the description. Following clarification, the cider was transferred over to a keg and was allowed to carbonate at 2.5 atmospheres of pressure. As this is a traditional dry style cider, no back seasoning was added to this cider. And now, on to the tasting. Alright, now it is time for the tasting of our 2023 British Humor Cider. This is the same recipe as last year, down to the ingredients. The only main difference between these two years of making this cider was the clarification technique. This one used Agar Clarification in order to produce a at least clear, if not brilliant finish to the cider. And that is different than last year, which did not use any clarification methods at all. So we're going to go ahead and give this cider a taste and see how we evaluate it. But first, we need to give this a pour. So let's do that. All right, we have our 2023 British Humor Cider. I'm going to go ahead and give this a look here. And that is very clear. It is much, much clearer than last year. I wouldn't quite put it on the brilliant finish yet, but it is damn close. It is real close to brilliant finish. That is nice looking. All right, so the appearance of this is a wonderful reddish gold. It is a petulant finish with a nice stream of bubbles coming off the top of it. The clarity is nearly perfect, and I'm going to go ahead and give this a 5.75 out of 6 for appearance. This is nice. There's nothing off about this cider by the looks. The appearance is nice. It has a nice, it is carbonated to expectations, which we would put this in as petulant. Let's go ahead and give it an aroma evaluation. So off the bat, we're getting bittersweet apples. You can kind of, so I would kind of say the difference between like a bittersweet and like a dessert apple type of aroma usually comes down to the deepness and richness of the apple character. This one has an apple character that is kind of like, it has more of like a toffee note in the smell, I guess is the best way of describing it, with maybe a slight hint of oakiness. I can kind of smell a little bit of vanilla and just actual like oak inside this. I think that this one aged actually a little bit longer than the last one on oak. And the oak is actually a little bit present in there. It's kind of muted compared to the bittersweet apple, but that combined with the oak produces this kind of apparent bittersweet smell. So aroma-wise, it is as I would expect for a cider of this classification. It is a nice, deep, rich apple and kind of oaky smell. So we're going to go ahead and give the aroma a 9.5 out of 10. And flavor-wise, we're going to do 2 sips. We're going to do the short sip, we're going to do the long sip. Let's go ahead and start with the short sip first. So crisp and tart on the front end for the short sip. It's a little bit, I would describe the overall impression first kind of as fleeting. It is just mildly on the watery side of things, which is a little bit disappointing because I would have expected that this would be a little bit more full body flavored and tasting. So mild acid, the acid is more indicative of a lactic acid. So kind of imagine, rather than apples, more of the sourdough type of acid. If you're familiar with sourdough, you'll instantly understand that distinction. There is definitely malic acid in here, but it's more of like a blend that is balanced towards the lactic acid side of things. Interestingly enough, if I recall from last year's British humor, there was a kind of barnyard character that I was getting out of it. And I'm not getting that same barnyard character. Let me go to the long sip now. Or give it a little bit of a longer palate adjustment. So on the front end, getting that lactic acid forward flavor on kind of like the tip of my tongue, but more towards the back of the tongue, it starts to get washed over with the tannin presence, and it kind of sweeps and coats the entire mouth. So when you take short sips of this, it tastes kind of watery. But when you take the longer sips of this, it has that overall really developed nice apple flavor, and the tannin is there just to help keep it there. It's not overstaying its welcome in a good way. It is lingering though, which is good. That's what you should expect for a cider like this. A high tannin cider should have a lasting flavor, a lasting taste in your mouth. It's not astringent, it is just dry. That is the kind of what I would describe this as. It is a very dry cider. I don't know if I would put it in the austere category, but it's very dry. So it's kind of hard to say when you cross from like dry to austere, but it's approaching that boundary, but I think it's staying on the more dry side of things. So overall, I'm going to mark off 2 points for kind of the dryness expected. I would expect a more drying type of cider. Also, the petulance here, the carbonation is kind of adding a little bit to it. I would have liked to see this cider be really, really, really carbonated, like gushing amounts of carbonation, sparkling level. I think that would add to the character of this a lot as well, and add that kind of carbonic acid there to round out those 3 acids that we would be expecting. We'd be expecting carbonic acid, we would be expecting malic acid, and if we went through malo-lactic fermentation, which this did, we would be expecting that lactic acid too. And I think that it's kind of missing that presence from the carbonic acid a little bit more, and kind of having that, having a more sparkling finish would have definitely helped this out quite a bit. So I'm going to give it a 20 out of 24 on flavor. I think it's very good. It is noticeably appley. I just am thinking that the carbonation might be what is kind of making this miss the mark a little bit, and that might actually make it have a more drying sensation too on the palate. Overall, this is a rather nice cider. I really like the simplicity of this. This is an ingredient that you can purchase year-round through More Beer for your bittersweet concentrate, and the apple juice blend that we have, that's just available in the supermarket. And that's, well, the malic acid. There was a large malic acid. I think there was a 25-gram malic acid addition to this. So that you'd have to pick up at the homebrew supply store as well. Not an uncommon ingredient. It's just, there's kind of a purity type of thing when you're making a cider, and you want to have, if you are using, say for instance, if you are using fresh picked apples, you want to have the overall character of whatever you're having at the end be indicative of those apples. We know, based off of the manufacturer records, that this is a blend of Dabinet, or Dabinet, I don't know how you pronounce that, apples and other UK bittersweet cider apples to produce this concentrate that we used in it. But we don't know for sure. So to make a English style cider, you typically blend bittersweet apples and bitter sharp apples. We are blending sweet sharp apples, so that kind of tricks the balance a little bit towards the less bitter and less acidic than we would like to, because those sweet apples oftentimes are dessert apples, and overly tart dessert apples are not typically drank. So I would say overall impression, I'm going to give this a 7 out of 10. That's my first gut that I'm saying at it. It's good. It's very good. It's simple to make. It is a wonderful, easy drinking cider. I think that you would enjoy it if you made it. I'm just trying to guess from a competition standpoint what the judges would think. I'm not getting any oiliness, ropiness, or anything like that, so no sign of Brettanomyces contamination. The character that we're missing from the backcountry type of ciders, which would be that barnyard type of flavor, it doesn't have that, which is a tad bit disappointing considering this was the same recipe and we were able to get it so well last year. So with all that being said, I'm going to count up our score. So we have 12.5, sorry, 13.5. No, that's 12.5. 12.5 plus 9.5 is 22, plus 20 is 42. So a 42 out of 50. Overall, pretty darn good. I think this cider is a wonderful, easy introduction into bittersweet ciders. And you don't need to go through the clarification process that I did. If you want to keep it hazy or just let it sit for a really, really, really long time, feel free to do that. That takes up a lot of space typically, and I like to have things bottled and moved around quicker. So I prefer to kind of do my own clarification. But if you have the time to do that and you want to sit it there, or you want to drink it that's hazy, I think that this is a wonderful cider to drink hazy too. And it's pretty darn easy. The recipe is very simple. It's 5.5 gallons to start out, and you brew it down to 5 gallons and carbonate it. It's mostly things that you can get in the store, with the exception of that bittersweet concentrate and malic acid. And oh, also oak. I should not neglect to say that. Overall, pretty darn good. Pretty darn good. So with our old scoring system, we're going to go ahead and divide that total by 5. So this would be an 8.4 out of 10. And that is my final score. So cider makers, I really hope you enjoyed this video. This is an ongoing process to perfect this cider. I will perfect it eventually. But this will be one of my competition submissions this year. And I think it's pretty darn good. So let me know what you think if you've tried using this bittersweet concentrate. I highly recommend it. It's so good. For what you have access to in the United States, you're not going to get a bittersweet concentrate that is this accessible year round. So please give it a go. So the manufacturers know to keep this stuff in stock because it's really good. Anyway, I'll check back with you guys in the next video. Cheers. Happy cidering.